Well, somebody said, dear listener, dear viewer, somebody said that they hated Mondays. I quite like Mondays because they don't make a damn bit of difference. What about you, Pat? Do you have any strong feelings on the subject of Mondays?
Uh, After I retired, Jude, Monday was my favorite day of the week. No, when you knew everybody else was getting up to go to work, and I'd turn around about 8 o'clock and say, "Oh, here, nice warm bed. I'm going nowhere."
You're very lucky, you know. I find when I'm waking up, I can't lie in the bloody bed. I gotta get up. Gotta get up. No matter what time it is, I've gotta get up. Um,
No,
you're
Jude,
obviously
I'm
what you're admitting to is you're just a lazy sod. That's what
absolutely proud of it. Jude, when I waking up and I'd say at 7:30, and for years I was up about 7:30, 8 o'clock, and
Aye.
when I was waking up, I'd say, right, once I retired, I remember saying, "Oh, hey, it's 8 o'clock. Oh, lovely." Turned around, went back to sleep. Lovely.
That must be one of the most treasured things in St. Columns, you know, for the boarders. You go up to the
Right.
sick room and say, "Oh, I have a headache or a sore toe or something," and the nurse would allow you to go to bed early and get up late. So when everybody else was
Uh,
going down to mass, like you were lying in your bed looking at the ceiling. Oh, it was really
uh,
treasured, you know. It was one of the
uh,
best
uh,
feelings ever. Anyway,
Best memories.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah. Okay, let's start with the most recent news, which is very sad. Well, one way it's sad and another way it's happy. Did you notice how they framed at the Vatican when they said he was dead? They said,
that he was going to his eternal whatever it was rest or something.
that's right, is something to that effect, continuing his service in the afterlife. I thought it was very well phrased, really, and got to the heart of what
Yeah,
Francis and presumably all
yeah,
Catholics or Christians would believe.
right.
Do you think he's a loss to the church? Do you think he was better than what went before? Do you think you might have to hold your breath a bit in terms of who's going to come next?
Yeah, well, Jude, for me, Francis was the best pope, I think, maybe since John Paul the 23rd. Everything he stood for, I would like to think I believe in as well. Know that thing. I love the humbleness. Like, Jude, I think sometimes the Catholic Church has totally lost its way. The pomp and the ceremony and all the rest of it. That was not my understanding what Jesus Christ was about.
Mm,
Jesus, no, it's supposed to be the servant of
hmm
God.
hmm
And the papacy with its carrying the Pope on high and all the robes and all the rest. Francis, right, he set the tone right from the start. After he at the conclave, when he was elected Pope, he didn't get into the big papal car and all the rest. He got on the bus the same as the rest of the other popes and went back. He insisted that he was not going to live in that big castle or whatever the hell. He went and lived in a humble apartment. Apparently, he queued up for his food the same as everybody else in the cafeteria.
mm.
And when they the robes, all the rest, he apparently he knew a wee tailor somewhere off the back street somewhere, and he went there and says, "Hey, go and make me a white robe." And that was it. Like none of the pomp, none of the whatever, and all the rest. No, dude, I think the symbolism. He believed in humility, and he lived his life that way. And I
Mhm.
think that was the symbolism. And dude, remember he was asked about same-sex marriage and homosexuality and gays and all
Yeah.
that. He says, "Who am I to criticize?"
Well,
Dude,
he didn't say
this
that.
thing
He
I
didn't,
think
Pat. He said, "Who am I to judge?" Which is a slightly different thing.
all right, who am I to judge? Well, okay, I take your point. That's a fine point, but who am I to judge? Dude, this thing that we have, that everybody else can judge everybody else, that as if we know, if you're gay, like I know some right wing Catholics seem to think that if you're gay, you're a sinner. Like, how do they know inside the head of somebody who's gay? Like,
Mhm.
how do they know that that person isn't the finest human being alive? You
Mhm.
know, this sort of thing. So, Pope Francis, to me, was sort of trying to say, judge lest ye not be judged yourself type thing.
Well, I agree with every word you said. I think the word he used first when he was appointed, I thought, or at least I heard, I'm sure he said lots of words, was the word mercy. You know,
Yeah.
mercy. And if you think about John Paul II, who's another revered pope, you know, in recent times, um, mercy is not the first word you would think of with regard to him. In fact, one of the most
No.
vivid images I have of him is somewhere in South America where he gets off the plane and these row of cardinals or maybe bishops are coming to greet him and kiss the papal ring. And he stands at the airport in
Yeah.
front of the steps,
I think
shaking
that was
his finger.
Argentina. Yeah.
You know, sort of public humiliation as the guy. Yeah, maybe that's the way he operated, but it was to me it was a joy. That's the kind of God that I believe in, a God of mercy, who
Yeah.
will understand that people do the best they bloody well can. The vast majority of people do the best they can in their lives, and that notion of having mercy on people, encouraging people, and embrace whatever goodness there is in the world, I'm 100% behind it. He had
Sure,
some.
I knew a priest who was big into liberation theology,
Mm,
and I remember him a long time ago, Jude. I can't remember whether it was Chile or Argentina that the Pope went to, John Paul. And I remember the guy saying to me, John Paul, he says, was having a big dinner with the, no, I think it was General somebody or other,
mm,
and he was the leader of the country and so on. And he says, if he had to listen closely, he would have heard the screams of prisoners being tortured not that far away. And he says, John Paul didn't condemn what was going on and all the rest of it. And now that doesn't make John Paul a bad guy. Maybe there was all sorts of things, but the point I'm making is, uh, Francis would certainly have made the point that this is not good enough and so on. So,
mm,
I think if you're looking for symbolism, should look at yesterday. That absolute moron on the White House, Trump,
mm.
issued an Easter statement. I wrote it down, Jude. Let me read it. Happy Easter. This is just the first sentence, by the way.
Yeah.
Happy Easter to all, including the radical left lunatics who are fighting and scheming to bring murderers, drug lords, dangerous prisoners, the mentally insane and well-known MS-13 gang members and wife beaters into our country. He referred to Joe Biden as a moron. He's spreading hate, division, and all the rest. He's the leader of the political leader of the biggest nation on earth. John Paul, or not John Paul, Francis. Contrast Francis' message of love, compassion, decency, humbleness with that lunatic in the
Mm,
White House.
mm,
Dude,
exactly.
I think we need people like Francis big time.
Oh
By
yeah,
the way, this is my final point. I think he was the true follower of Jesus Christ.
yeah.
I really genuinely believe that.
Completely agree with you, Pat. He was an inspirational man. A good friend of mine, Desi Donnelly, God be good to him, he's dead now. But he said that he was convinced that the replacement of Gregory, resigning and replacing him with Francis, he was sure that was a direct act of God, that was what
Yeah.
exactly what was needed in the church. Now,
Was that not Benedict? You
oh,
mean
Benedict,
was not
sorry,
Benedict?
Benedict, yeah,
Yeah,
Benedict,
yeah,
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 came
yeah,
over.
yeah,
Benedict was very much a rules man, I think, a
yeah.
sophisticated
Typical
thinker,
German.
but
Yeah.
Francis was something different. He had some great phrases, one of the things was I was reading up about him. He had apparently almost nightly telephone calls to people in Gaza, to individuals
Yeah.
in Gaza. I suppose to encourage them or let them know that the Pope was concerned for them. Another good phrase, he was somebody asked him about unfettered capitalism. I was thinking about this with regard to Vance. He described unfettered capitalism as being the dung of the devil,
Yeah. Isn't
which
that
I think is
unbelievable?
pretty
Yeah.
damn good, pretty damn good. Uh,
But the thing, uh, you judge people not by what they say, their actions. Like he went. I think it was 2000. Was it 18 to Lesbos during the height of that, the crisis of the, uh, uh, and he brought back 12, I think, or 14 Syrian refugees to live in the Vatican. Like,
mhm,
in other words, he was willing to do something. I think it was it 2018 he came to Ireland and
yeah.
apologized for the institutional abuse. Like he was willing to do things that other popes have not been willing to do,
Uh,
and some of them not very popular either.
They say again, I was looking this up. They said that on Holy Thursday, the way the priest washes the feet of
The
people
feet, yeah, yeah,
like Jesus did. So apparently, he made a point of going to jails, hospitals, retirement homes, and slums every year, different
yeah.
places, and washing their feet. I think it's very powerful, because the people in the slums, the people in the jails, those are the forgotten of the earth. The people with nothing really. And he went to them. I couldn't speak more highly enough of him. Whenever John Paul died, I don't know if you remember this. When his death was announced, a big crowd in the St. Peter's Square, and there
Where,
was a
yeah,
bunch of people chanting "Sancto Subito," a saint immediately. Do a rush job,
yeah.
make him a saint, and they made him a saint. I'll be honest with you. I would put John Paul further back in the queue, I think, and I'd have Francis right at the front. He was a saintly
Same
man.
here. Yeah,
And,
yeah.
if you're going to have saints, I believe. Did you know that, by the way, did you know that he was a janitor at one stage in his life? And he also
No.
was a bouncer. Can you believe that?
Yeah.
I was like,
He
I
was
was
the
doing
son.
it.
He was the son of Italian immigrants to Buenos Aires.
That's right.
So he
That's
came
right.
back. He came back. No wonder he could speak Italian.
I love that. I love the idea of him being a bouncer because he's sort of built a bit like a bouncer when you think about it.
But the other thing as well, he was brought up in Argentina at a time when there was a real right wing dictatorship and all the
Yeah,
rest.
yeah,
And I wondered did that affect him, because it made him like, Jude, I know it's very funny. I know a couple of guys from my hometown who would I would describe as very right wing, traditional conservative Catholics.
yeah.
And if you believe that Francis was the direct successor to St. Peter, these guys were considering themselves better Catholics than he was. That they thought that Francis had lost the traditional or lost the old values. I was
Mm.
thinking to myself, if you believe that Jesus appointed Peter and Peter, that this Pope, as the under God, there's some two or three young guys running around like Kenny think they're more know more
Well,
about the workings of the Catholic faith than Jesus Christ.
well, I suppose probably what they're being is critical of his policies or the things he says,
Yeah, yeah.
and
And I
I
know
would have been
I'm being a bit
equally.
facetious here. Say again.
I'd be critical of John Paul II. Some of the things he said. He was
Yeah,
very political guy and very political in favor of the West against the USSR. Maybe he was right too, but he was political.
yeah.
I think you can criticize the guy, but the notion that that would disqualify him from being a pope is a bit daft. Um, I'm trying to think. There was something else I wanted to say about that. Oh yeah,
Yeah,
what?
when you're thinking of that,
Yeah.
some of the tributes to France has been King Charles and Queen Camilla. Charles is absolutely very, very intense. I don't know what's the right word. Very nice tribute to him. Sky was just reading it out there
Mm,
before we came on there.
mm,
And it was obvious he had a real deep affection for
mm.
Francis.
Yeah.
It was very warm in tone.
Well, I frankly don't give a damn what Prince Charles says. That's the God's truth. And I think we sometimes attribute a lot of other people in a sense. Oh, that guy says that's good, then he must be good. Or if this guy says that's bad, then he
Yeah,
must be bad. We're capable of making up our own minds. And frankly, you don't have to think too long before you can see that Francis was a good man. God be good to him, I'm sure he will. What did you
yeah.
think of that? You had a slightly irreverent comment in your email to me. Yeah, what did you think of one of the it might have been the last visitor that Francis had,
I, I,
J.D. Vance?
I said to you, is advance killed him? Yeah. So,
You
like,
felt life
I
wasn't
don't
worth
even
living
mean that in a
anymore.
funny sense, but remember Liz Truss went to visit Queen Elizabeth and she died soon afterwards. And I thought, Jesus, here Vance comes to see
Yeah.
what is it with these right wing politicians? No, no, due to in all seriousness, I was watching yesterday. I was watching the news last night, and Vance was there with Pope and Jude. I actually said to my dear Mrs. I said that Pope is not long for Judy.
Ah,
Looked very real, and God bless him. He took his duty so seriously.
mhm,
Judy. He must have been very ill yesterday,
mhm,
and you could see it in his face
mhm.
and so on. And yet, I think he wanted to be seen to be doing Easter week,
Yeah. Yeah.
and doing all the right things.
Mhm.
But you could see in his face, the man was seriously
Oh,
ill yesterday. And
yeah.
in fact, I think he shouldn't have been allowed to do what he did yesterday.
Yeah.
He must have made Herculean efforts to be there.
I mean, it had part of a lung removed at an early age,
Yeah,
so he was struggling with that, I suppose, all his life.
he
Why?
had double pneumonia apparently, Jude.
Oh,
So
that's
can
right.
you
Yeah,
imagine?
the last few
Do you
weeks.
know, trying to breathe
Mm.
and all that sort of stuff? Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Jude.
What did you think of Vance? Why do you think Vance went to Rome with his family?
Well,
And
Vance
yeah,
came out with someone.
okay.
Remember a statement about I love you love yourself and your community before you love others. The Pope sort of chided him about that. He says that's not the way it works. You have to you just can't pick and choose who you love and who you look after. Vance is a complex character. He converted to Catholicism several years ago,
Aye.
and I think when the Pope chided him, I think in a way he I think Vance to nail it down, I think he's going to run for presidency after Trump,
Okay.
and he wants that whole evangelical Catholic right wing stuff. Like,
Hmm.
Jude, there's a hell of a lot of Catholics in Trump's background.
Yes.
All
Yes.
these right wing people. God bless us, but Jude, that's their Catholicism is not my Catholicism.
Well, I'm going to be very unchristian now, and I'm going to say the only reason Vance was there was to get in the public mind a kind of an imprimatur, a stamp of approval from the
Yeah,
Pope, so that loads of Catholics would say, "Oh, geez, see the way he was with the Pope, and he was so good, and he shook hands and even touched him on the shoulder in a tender way."
yeah.
You know,
After he got lambasted across the world for his treatment of Zelensky, the bullying and the sort of
yeah.
disgraceful behavior, I think he was trying to do a wee bit of PR with the Pope.
Yeah, well, you see, the thing is, he's got a lot of ground to make up. I don't think going to see the Pope's going to make a damn bit of difference from him
No,
because
no,
he may not be the dung of the devil, but he's not far from it, as far as I'm concerned. I mean,
yeah,
this guy was acting and still acts as the attack dog for Trump. You know,
yeah,
he's a well-trained attack dog. And what's
yeah.
more, he's totally behind what Joe Biden, to be fair, was also totally behind, and that is the pumping of weapons and armaments into Israel to kill Gazans. And
Richard,
how could
as
you
far as
now?
I know, Vance is a Yale. He's a qualified lawyer from Yale.
Uh,
And the other day, he said that Trump had the power to overrule the courts. Jude, if we're reaching the stage that the politicians can overrule courts, Jude, we're going down a very, very dangerous road.
I,
By the way, Trump has already floated the idea that not only will he deport illegal aliens, but he's what would you say, investigating or looking out the possibility of sending American citizens who commit crimes to foreign jails. And he's floated the idea already. And a lot of the old right wingers are saying, yeah, no, for instance, if you set fire to Elon Musk's garage somewhere, and protest about what he's doing, you could be sent to that, even though you're an American citizen. Trump is floating the idea that you can be sent to that hellhole in El Salvador.
mhm. Well, I listened to a podcast, and the guy was making the point, and I thought it was a very good one. He was saying this guy, it's acknowledged publicly that this guy was sent by mistake to El
Yeah.
Salvador, to this horrible prison, which apparently is a real hellhole. On the podcast, they said, well, he probably was not only living in terrible circumstances, but he probably was tortured as well. And people don't
Yeah.
come out of that place. The fact is that Trump has conceded, yes, it was a mistake, but there's nothing I can do about it. And sitting
Yeah.
across the room from him was the guy who runs El Salvador. And
Yeah.
the guy who runs El Salvador sort of sniggered and said, well, yeah, nothing you can do about it. And
Dude,
this
let's
guy says
go ahead, sir.
that's the end of law. If guys can be
Uh,
taken, we know they're innocent, and we'll shovel them off somewhere and we'll forget about them. That could happen to anyone.
Are you seriously telling me, or is Trump, that the president of America couldn't lean on the president or the prime minister, no, it's the president of El Salvador to get an innocent man home? Of
Of
course
course.
he could. The other
No,
thing as
the
well, too, by the
Supreme
way,
Court told
the
him that he should.
yeah, 9-0.
9-0.
They've yeah, yeah. But here's the thing: they come out with this thing the last day. Apparently, this guy, the guy that's sent illegally, the Trump people tried to come out and say the last day he's a member of this gang SM-13 or whatever the hell
Mm.
this drug extortion rapists and all the rest of it, and they produced this a photograph of his hand with this.
Tattoo.
The only thing is, it was so incompetent. When he was, there was a photograph taken apparently at one of a christening or something a couple of weeks ago, and the guy didn't, and his family produced a photograph. The tattoos are not on his hand. So in other words, that's how the sort of thing that they're up to. They are trying to justify the unjustifiable, and it's pure fascism. It really is, and I think it's deliberate. I think they're sending out a message. This is what we do.
Yeah, yeah. I think, well, as I say, this podcaster guy, and he writes for the New York Times, and he's a smart guy. He's Jewish, actually. But he made the point that we are in an emergency now. We're not talking about an emergency coming down the road. He says this is an emergency because the president is saying that he can take somebody who's innocent and have them sent to this place, and then he can say, "Well, I know he's innocent, but that's the way it is." So the guy won't come out. They say they won't have, he won't allow the guy to come out because the guy might say then what happened to him in there, that the
Yeah,
terrible place it
absolutely.
was, he was probably tortured as well, and therefore
Yeah,
you see, I think myself, Guantanamo Bay set the precedent, and I'm only
yeah,
beginning to understand it now. They have this sort of gulag on somebody
mm,
else's soil, which in
yeah,
some way or another allows them to have these people there without trial. If they were on American soil, the idea was that they would have to have some process of justice, but
yeah.
because they're down
Uh,
there, let's be honest, the gulag that all those guys were sent to in their orange jumpsuits over the years from the Middle East,
uh,
those were done under the watch of who? Not
Bush, George W.
no,
Bush.
aye, Bush
Uh,
started with Bush. I was going to
uh,
say, did Biden, not Biden, but Bill Clinton is part of that? But no, I don't think so. It was
no,
started with
it
Bush,
started.
and it
Bush was president
continued.
when that.
That's the thing, Pat. It's continued.
What?
It
Oh yeah.
continued.
Well, no, what do you call him? Obama tried to close it, but he was blocked by because the Congress wouldn't agree to it. But having said that, Jude, no, America's no this sort of fake, land of laws and jurisdiction and all that sort of stuff. Jude, when you have Guantanamo Bay and now El Salvador, in other words, you're basically saying we can torture anybody as long as it's not done in American. So, like it's an illusion that nobody's buying, Jude. America is up to its eyeballs now in corruption, political corruption, torture, everything that you do, and it's out in the open.
Well, this guy was talking on the podcast again to a woman who's an expert in these kind of constitutional matters. And in essence,
Mm.
she said the only way you can get this guy out of there, maybe, is to impeach Trump.
Yeah,
But to impeach Trump, you have to get the Congress and the Senate. She says you might, at a pinch, get the Congress, but you'll not get the Senate to vote for
no,
impeachment. Uh,
no,
this guy he hasn't been in office for 100 days, and he's
yeah.
doing stuff where it's clearly impeachable, what he's
Uh,
done.
Jude, I think I mentioned this last week, and I don't remember now who it was. There was I think a Democratic guy. It might have been Adam Schiff. I'm not 100% certain, but he said, "Let's get it out there. We have got to come up with making it clear that those who break the laws right now and think they're immune, that we will set up a commission to examine their rules, and that like a bit like no, after the Second World War, what do you call the famous thing? Not the Nuremberg trials, whatever the hell they call them.
Yes, I know.
That basic that if you've done something that's totally illegal, just because you're a Trump supporter, now Trump will probably give him before he goes, probably give him a presidential pardon. But anyway, he says we've got. He says if we're serious about maintaining our status as a democracy and about of a rules-based society, these people will have to be held accountable. How accountable they will be, Jude, and all. But at least the warning is there.
Well, I said to my wife that you hear of these terrible things, and so many people supporting them. The Republican Party is just on its knees now and does whatever Trump tells it to do. But
Yeah,
at the same time, I was saying, there's an awful lot of smart, courageous people in America, bright guys writing for the New York Times and Washington Post and
yeah,
so on. And there must be, well, there's people like, what's his name? Bernie Sanders and
yeah.
what's AOK or what's her name? Uh,
Ocasio,
uh,
AOC. Yeah, I
AOC,
can never remember her name.
okay.
Yeah,
That people like that are strong and articulate and will speak out, and presumably there'll be others who would do it at a pinch. So I'd like to think
yeah,
that the American people, I think more highly of them and believe that they would refuse to accept this. I mean, it's just ridiculous. I mean, if only for selfish reasons, because
yeah.
everybody's at the mercy of Trump. If
But you know what do you call it? Caroline Levitt, the press secretary,
yeah,
the
the
blonde
really good
27
looking
year
little
old.
blonde one.
Yeah, yeah. She came out the other day and she said, about the thing about the tariffs. She says the media, the left wing media, and the who else? Oh, the Democrats don't understand the genius of, in other words, and as well as that, the left wing media are promoting these drug dealers and all the rest of it. No, no, no. Jude, the only person in the whole world, this Christ-like figure in the White House, he's the only person on the planet who understands the big game. According to Jude, the sort of sycophancy of anybody. Trump, the tariffs are every economic and financial guru that's available said they're the stupidest thing in history. But only Trump understands the game. Now, Trump is also turning around and saying 70 countries are coming and kissing my ass. Dude, somebody asked the last day, can we have a list of these countries and exactly what deals? There's no deals done yet, as far as we know.
He's
China, apparently, they've tried 3 or 4 times Trump to ring Xi Jinping, or whatever the hell you call him, and apparently he's not taking their calls until Trump apologizes or Vance apologizes for this peasant's remark, apparently, or ameliorates it in some way. The Chinese are not for playing ball.
I think what he doesn't appreciate the grave mistake of taking people who would naturally be friendly towards him, i.e., the EU or Ireland or whatever.
Yeah,
And he's put a big question mark over the whole thing as far as they're concerned now. And I
yeah.
think the EU will be looking towards the likes of China, for example. And see, we talk about having human rights. Like, of course, human rights are flouted right, left, and centre, I'm sure, in China. But by God, they're not. There are not much sign of them if they're allowing people to be whipped off the streets in America and sent down to
America,
El Salvador.
America doesn't need to elect, but what do you call the Chinese prime minister? What do you call him, Lee, or whatever his name
The,
is? Can't
uh,
remember. Yang Ping Lee or something. About it.
uh, uh,
Anyway, he was the last. God forgive me. I don't mean to be
I
disrespectful,
know, I
but
know.
he went on tour in Vietnam,
Yeah,
Japan, and somewhere else the last day. Dude, you can bet your life that Trump has alienated all those farmer allies. Like those people are looking now, and apparently what he's saying is, look, okay, we've got our faults, but we're stable. We'll be here in 100 years' time. Trump will be gone in another couple of years. Like in other words, Trump is really, in terms of diplomacy, he's been a disaster. He's treating allies and enemies exactly the same. And when your allies become your enemies, he's got real problems.
yeah. Pat, let's move sort of sideways and still linked with Trump. Um, on the news, RT News last night, I saw two items which actually really I bridled at them. I sort of got I was saying bad words to the TV. One of the items on the news that the RTE had yesterday was Vance with the Pope. And at no point did any of the commentators or anyone say, this man Vance is joined at the hip, so to speak, with Trump. And Trump is doing the most outrageous things. That wasn't mentioned. Now, you might say, oh, well, that wasn't a time or place. But I mean, it's staring in the face. This is the essence of this man. He called Trump all the names of the day. And then when he got the chance to get into as vice president, you say, oh, he's a wonderful guy. And he's hoping that he'll be the presidential candidate, as you say. So that none of that seamy side, that horrible side of him was mentioned. The other thing, Pat, and you may disagree with me on this, but on the news yesterday was, appropriately enough, the filming or shots from O'Connell Street, where they had
Yeah,
the
the
proclamation
Easter
read
Rising. Yeah,
and
yeah,
the
yeah.
army marching and the jets flying overhead. Now,
Yeah.
I think if I'd been somebody from Mars, I would say, God, isn't that fantastic? Those people fought for the freedom. And by God, they did it. What an amazing thing to do. I think, again, that's closing one eye and saying the truth of the matter is the people that the Irish people fought against and ejected from the 26 counties, they still are administering in control of 6 of those counties. Why is it not somehow slid in there in the language, even in the most diplomatic of language? It's just not mentioned. It's like something from 1984, as if it didn't exist. That there was, the rising, there was the War of Independence, and now we're free. No,
Mhm.
don't mention Ulster, whatever you do. Do
Yeah,
you, do
yeah.
you,
No,
is there,
I've often thought the same, and and when I listen to Micheál Martin and Harris and so on, should it's almost as if the North is sort of doesn't exist, and this sort of myopic
completely,
version that
completely, not, not,
yeah,
not, yeah. Completely as if
Yeah,
it doesn't exist. Yeah.
yeah. You know, yeah, and I know this, and we've mentioned it a million times. This sort of thing, the shared island, and in this thing, much better that we make agreement first in the north before we talk about Irish unity. Jude, as you rightly pointed out on numerous occasions, if we're waiting for the last unionists to say, okay, a United Ireland's okay, Jude, we'll be here. If we come back in 1,000 years' time, we'll probably still be waiting on the last unionists. So, like, that's bollocks, Jude. The point is, if we're serious about unity, Jude, let's get this. It's the most ridiculous thing on an island that there's two administrations.
Yeah. But my
There's the people living on the bigger island over there should not have any say on how we run this island.
I couldn't agree more with you. But you see, my gripe is that the news by the national broadcaster acts as if the North literally didn't exist. There's no mention of it.
Yeah,
I mean, there would be ways of
yeah,
slipping that in, and
yeah.
we're striving towards a happy and united. They didn't even mention a shared island, as if the
No,
North simply didn't exist. And now
yeah.
that to me is 1984 stuff because
Yeah, but
that's the way the world.
that's what there are massive contradictions and hypocrisies and whatever other words you want to use about people celebrating the freedom of the island while ignoring that a part of it's still occupied,
Exactly,
and also
exactly. That's
and condemning those who raise it and saying you are troublemakers up there and whatever. And hey, we don't want those sort of views coming down here contaminating our society. You people are we've had the troubles in the past. We don't need any more troubles. So shut your mouth and stay quiet.
Pat, I would bet you 50 quid that if you or I raised that in a group of people who weren't
You'll get a slap in
politically,
the mouth.
no,
Yeah,
not even a slap in the mouth, they just say, ah, you bloody nutty, you're a Ra
yeah,
supporter, all the rest.
yeah, yeah.
You
No,
really would be seen as
absolutely.
being highly eccentric. Why can't you just rejoice in the beautiful way that they celebrated the
Yeah.
proclamation and the bands and president and all the rest?
Forget that the fact that Westminster still rules this place, that Hillary Benn can make decisions, that the British government can decide what happens in a part of this island. But forget about it. Sure, there's 26 counties free and all the rest of it. And sure, aren't you doing all right up there?
Yeah. Okay. Uh, Finally, we're running about two
We
minutes.
left.
Just a very quick one. There's a Policy Institute of King's College London have done a big survey of how people thought about things in 1947 and how they think about things now. Uh, in 1947, or maybe even earlier, 1937, in fact, would you say homework was a popular thing or an unpopular thing?
I would say it was probably unpopular then.
Yes, homework was unpopular as ever with children, but today, 7 in 10 people think children should have to do homework on their own time after school. I think I agree with that completely. I think it's good because
Mm,
you can get some notion of how well your kids understanding the work they're doing, and it's
yeah.
just sort of brings you close to them. Funnily enough, my years teaching in Canada, there never was homework. There was no such thing as
Where's
homework
the
on a regular basis. But they
Dude,
would have
is
them.
it Finland has the best education system in the world? It's the most at the minute. It's top. I think it came top, and they don't do homework.
Well, there's a case for both, but I would be happy to have the homework. I welcomed it when my kids were growing up because I'm a bit closer to them. Do you think men do more work about the house than women do back then? Have men improved in terms of their
Not
domestic
at
duties?
not at all. Not at all. No, men came in, got their paper and their pipe, and sat down, and the wife brought them a cup of tea. Back in the 1937, not
Uh,
at all.
you don't think
Well,
it
it was
happens?
women's work.
You don't think it happens now?
I'd say, Jude, it's very changed now. Like I've been known to wash the dishes, or at least do the dishwasher, and hoover the house and do a wee bit
Oh,
of
Pat,
polishing.
good man
Yeah,
yourself.
yeah,
Good man yourself.
yeah.
I'm riddled with guilt in that score. I'll talk to you about it again. We're out of time, Pat, and we'll have to
Best,
talk to you
Jude.
about our man in Ottawa this week, maybe.
Yes, by
Okay.
Friday. Yeah.
Okay. All the
Okay,
best, Pat.
Jude.
Thanks very
Happy
much.
Easter.
Okay. Happy
Enjoy
Easter,
Easter
you too.
Monday.